Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
I am Luffy, Partner System Online, One Piece, by Veltoria. Died in sleep, reborn as a child Luffy. No crew, no powers, just pain and a grindy system. To grow stronger, he must level up others. Each powered-up partner unlocks anime abilities. Fairy tale magic, soul blades, one-hit swords. With friendship, Hellgarp training, and a game UI, he's grinding his way to Pirate King in a darker One Piece world. Adios. Bittersweet.
The burly man cracked his whip with theatrical flair, the sharp snap 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 slicing through the air. "Sorry, I'll get moving," Luffy said with an awkward smile, nodding politely at the man. "Hurry up," the man grunted, not pressing the issue. Luffy looked strong, maybe he'd end up as a fellow worker soon enough. That thought took the man back 2 months. Back then, he was still toiling away in the fields under the sun. But now, as long as he followed the boss's orders, he could eat all the meat he wanted and sleep with any woman he liked. It had been a smart move to submit early. Seeing that the man didn't pursue the matter, Luffy lost the urge to interfere further. He waited until he was out of sight and then resumed following the direction pointed by the Vivre card. Behind the scorching construction site, Luffy spotted something unexpected, a small castle. It had all the standard features: rounded turrets, narrow windows, arched doorways, low domed roofs, and protruding lintels. Every architectural detail was present. The stone walls shimmered subtly under the sunlight. Clearly, the castle was newly built, untouched by the wear of time. At its entrance stood 2 guards. They weren't clad in armor, but they wore matching uniforms and carried identical longswords. "Halt! Who are you?" one shouted, sword raised to block Luffy's path. No one would have guessed these 2 guards were simple farmers just 2 months ago. Luffy didn't bother talking. With 2 quick chops to their necks, they collapsed to the ground. Even elite soldiers wouldn't pose a threat to him, let alone a couple of farmers trained only in basic posturing. Thud, thud, the guards hit the ground. Luffy walked right in. Inside, the castle was surprisingly modest. The exterior far outshone the decor within. However, what the interior lacked in luxury, it made up for in scantily clad maids. They moved through the halls in a steady flow, their revealing outfits making even Luffy, a longtime shut-in, blush. Sometimes, being half-dressed was even more seductive than being completely naked. "This place is a damn sin," Luffy muttered. Ignoring the curious stares, he marched deeper into the castle. Past the main hall, he entered a side chamber. Judging by the furnishings, it was likely a bedroom. He reached a large door, and the Vivre card practically leapt toward it, sticking to the wood. No doubt about it, the person he was tracking was inside. Luffy was curious. Why would a pirate crew carry a Vivre card linked to a tiny nation like this? And why had no one stopped him? Only 2 guards had stood at the door, and he'd faced no resistance at all. Knock knock knock. Luffy rapped on the door politely. "Who the hell is it?" A voice roared from inside. Luffy frowned. That voice sounded oddly familiar. Knock knock knock. He knocked again, his curiosity deepening. "Damn it," came a muttered curse, followed by heavy footsteps. "Who's got a death wish?" The voice snapped as the door swung open. Both men froze. Luffy blinked in surprise. The man inside stared, stunned. Luffy broke into a sly grin as he eyed the half-naked pirate captain standing there in nothing but boxer shorts. Well, Luffy teased. "Nice place you've got here. Aren't you that infamous 130 million bounty pirate, Black Tiger Park? What happened, ran out of clothes?" He laughed out loud. This little detour had turned out far more entertaining than expected. Park shook his head, trying to clear the illusion. For a second, he thought he was still stuck in last night's nightmare. He took 2 steps back, instinctively letting Luffy into the room. The chamber was lavish, beautiful furniture, plush beds, tables, chairs, a couch, and a tea set on the table. On the bed lay 2 beautiful women, naked except for a small towel draped across their lower halves. Their eyes were red and puffy from crying. Luffy stepped forward. Park stepped back. Forward, back, forward, back. Eventually, Luffy had chased him into a corner. Park's head smacked against the wall with a dull thud, snapping him out of his daze. His voice trembled. How did you find me? He remembered that day all too well, hundreds of his men defeated by this single monster. He himself had been knocked out effortlessly, surviving only by sheer luck when he'd clung to a lifeboat's rope. He had thought he'd never see this demon again. After all, the island had no magnetic field and wasn't on any known sea route. Unless someone blindly sailed here by pure chance. Park had planned to rule this place as a self-made king for the rest of his life. And yet here this devil was again, so soon. In response, Luffy simply smiled and extended his right hand. The vivre card rose from his palm, drifting gently until it slapped against Park's face. Park caught it and froze, eyes wide. He recognized it. Back when he'd looted a treasure haul, he had hidden this piece of vivre card to prevent his men from stealing the ship. He never imagined that very card would lead death right to his door. Park stared at the card, regret and shame flooding his chest. But under the weight of impending death, those feelings quickly twisted into rage. "You bastard!" Park screamed. "You've gone too far." His body began to change, his muscles swelling, fur bristling black and thick, eyes glowing gold, teeth elongating into fangs. He transformed into a towering black tiger, sleek and powerful. Even though it wasn't Luffy's first time seeing it, he couldn't help but murmur, "Man, that's badass." Park's transformation was fierce. He glared at Luffy like a true jungle king, then lunged, razor claws aimed straight for Luffy's heart. Luffy didn't even bother using armament haki. He slapped the paw away with his left hand, sending Park staggering. Park quickly pivoted, crouched low, and launched another strike toward Luffy's waist. Clang! His claws scraped against a black surface, they couldn't even penetrate an inch. Luffy spun around, grabbed Park's paw, and yanked him forward. Park had no chance to resist the overwhelming strength. Luffy kicked him in the stomach, pulled his arm again, and followed with a side kick to the waist, then another, and another. After more than a dozen brutal blows, Park's eyes rolled back, and blood sprayed from his mouth. Gah! Cough! Park collapsed to his knees, one hand clutching his belly, the other propping himself up. He wheezed and choked violently. It hadn't even taken a full minute, Luffy had already beaten the fury out of him. Luffy stepped forward. Park quickly raised his hand, palm outward. Wait. Wait, please. Luffy stopped, curious what he had to say. Park, ignoring the pain, dropped to the floor and kowtowed. "Spare my life. We don't have a blood feud, right? Let me live and I'll serve you. I used to be the king's personal guard. I know how to run a palace. Spare me and you'll be the new king of this island. I'll take care of everything, you won't have to lift a finger." He slammed his head to the ground repeatedly. At the edge of death, pride meant nothing. "King, huh?" Luffy said with a bemused smile. "Yes. You'd rule over thousands, command endless treasure, women, whatever you desire." "That's your idea of a king?" Luffy asked. "What?" "Never mind." Luffy dashed forward. His armament haki-covered fist grew larger in Park's vision. Boom! The punch blasted Park through the castle wall. Ding! "Congratulations, host. You have slain a wanted pirate. Express 11,500. Gold 18,000. Already up to 150,000 gold, huh?" Luffy muttered to himself. He glanced at the two stunned girls on the bed but said nothing. He simply turned and walked out of the castle. What a waste of a cool devil fruit. By the next morning, the news of Park's death had spread across the entire nation. All those traitors who had once sided with Park were captured and imprisoned. All those who had been enslaved were now free. The people celebrated with cheers and tears of joy. It hadn't been a long time, just 2 months under oppression, but that short period had made them cherish freedom more deeply than ever before. Luffy stood on the deck of the pirate ship, watching the people gathered at the port to see him off. His gaze was complex. Some looked at him with admiration. Some, with reluctant farewells in their eyes. But a few watched the ship disappear into the distance with a different light in their eyes, gleaming with excitement and greed. Some things, people never think about if they've never seen them. But once they've tasted their beauty, someone will always be willing to do anything to possess them. Luffy shook his head. "Well, it's not really my problem." He opened the system shop to browse this month's random items. Looks powerful, but way out of my price range. Steering the ship, Luffy followed the log post toward the next destination. Port Sabayati, a port city located in the central section of the first half of the Grand Line. Anyone who had spent time on the Grand Line, merchants, pirates, bounty hunters, or marines, would typically carry a permanent pointer to Port Sabayati. It was the largest commercial trading hub in the entire first half of the Grand Line. Here, any item could be traded, including the heads of wanted pirates. Here stood the biggest auction house in this half of the sea. Devil fruits, famous swords, cutting-edge scientific research, all had shown up for sale at some point. Of course, rare items weren't auctioned every day. The usual goods were gold and silver trinkets, antiques, calligraphy, and slaves. In Port Sabayati, pirates and marines could sit down and eat in the same room, because no one dared to start trouble. This was the domain of Warlord of the Sea, Don Quixote Doflamingo. Naturally, Luffy didn't know any of that. He was just following the log pose, which pointed him straight here. As soon as he reached the harbor, Luffy's eyes lit up. Rows upon rows of pirate ships lined the port. To him, each one looked like a small fortune waiting to be claimed. But Luffy wasn't stupid. Any port that could accommodate so many pirate ships at once was clearly more dangerous than it looked. He decided it would be wise to do some recon first. He might be strong, but not invincible. If he barged into the wrong place and it turned out to be a den of powerful enemies, things could go very badly. He docked his ship at the pier and stepped ashore. The entire wharf was paved with marble. It wasn't exactly clean, but it was level enough for freight carts to move without issue. The place was bustling. Crowds of people swarmed the docks, shoulder to shoulder. Some were loading cargo onto ships, others were unloading it. The air was filled with the roar of voices and the clatter of goods. Navigating through the crush of people was tough. To move faster, Luffy even used observation haki. Once he made it out of the port area, the largest building in the city came into view, the Camus auction house. It sat at the end of a wide main road that ran straight from the docks. Both sides of the road were lined with large shops. The auction house only dealt in rare treasures, so for everyday needs, most people preferred to shop at the stores along the road. Every major merchant guild with a name on the Grand Line had a branch here. Several side streets cut across the main road at intervals. These side streets were home to all the service industries you could imagine: bars, inns, hot springs, brothels, casinos. Some areas even offered all-in-one, full-service packages, occupying entire blocks. The crowds here weren't as packed as the docks, but the streets were still far from quiet. Luffy wasn't interested in the businesses selling salt, fabric, or household goods. What he really wanted was a good meal. But this was also his first time seeing an actual auction house, in either his past life or this one. His curiosity got the better of his appetite. He decided to take a look inside, especially after overhearing a passerby mention that a special item was being auctioned today, a devil fruit. That alone was enough to pique Luffy's interest. Outside the auction house, the auction was already underway, and the guards at the entrance were turning away anyone who tried to enter. Luckily, Luffy had his own methods. Acting clueless, he strolled up to the front gate. Just as the guards moved to block him, a subtle burst of Conqueror's haki radiated from his body, striking them with a wave of invisible pressure. The guards fell into a brief daze, and Luffy walked right past them. "Hey, did you see that guy?" a nearby pirate said, eyes wide. He went in after the auction started. His companion quickly hushed him. "Don't stare. Anyone the guards won't stop isn't someone we should be commenting on." The first pirate immediately ducked his head, glancing nervously around. After confirming no one had noticed, he let out a sigh of relief. Luffy, meanwhile, had no idea he'd just scared the hell out of a pirate. Inside, the auction was in full swing. At that moment, a beautiful jeweled crown was on the block. This crown, the auctioneer announced grandly, was handcrafted by renowned West Blue gem artisan Master Shikimans. It features two perfectly symmetrical rows of red crystal gems, decreasing in size as they near the center. And at the very heart, this is the real prize, we have the legendary Forest Heart gemstone, which rivals the Desert Heart and Ocean Heart in fame. In sunlight, the gem's radiance turns the entire crown a stunning shade of green, a symbol of royal nobility. The opening bid is 30 million berries. The auctioneer's words were as theatrical as they were unverifiable. Then he banged the gavel to start the bidding. Luffy quietly watched the nobles and elites fight tooth and nail, perhaps even bankrupt themselves, just for a fancy green hat. He was here just to see the spectacle, not to buy anything. In the end, the crown was sold to a noble named Gebelau for 99.99 million berries, setting the hall ablaze with excitement. Each item that followed was more extravagant than the last. The crowd grew more frenzied with every bid. But Luffy didn't understand most of what was being sold. The only item he recognized, a grade 1, great, sword, went for a relatively modest 20 million berries. As the auction dragged on, Luffy was on the verge of dozing off. That was when two elegant attendants appeared, carrying a box as they walked solemnly out from behind the stage. The auctioneer tapped the gavel lightly to calm the room. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. Today's grand finale, a devil fruit. He spread his arms wide in dramatic flair as a spotlight fell perfectly onto the box. What kind of fruit will it be? After a few yawns, Luffy finally perked up a bit. On stage, the auctioneer gestured for the attendants to open the secure case, then began his usual scripted introduction to build excitement. As we all know, devil fruits fall into three main categories: paramecia, logia, and zone types. While consuming one earns the wrath of the sea, it also grants the user incredible powers. Today's fruit, as verified by our esteemed appraisers, is. The box was slowly opened, and in that instant, Luffy's lazy expression sharpened. His eyes widened, disbelief etched across his face as he stared at the fruit nestled inside the box. According to our appraisal, this is the mightiest of all logia-type fruits, the Mera Mera no Mi, the Flame Flame fruit. Crash! Luffy jumped up in shock, accidentally shattering his chair with the force of his movement. He stood frozen, staring at the orange-red fruit covered in swirling, flame-shaped patterns. No way, how is this possible? This fruit, Ace found it after setting out to sea, didn't he? How could it be here now? Did I cause a butterfly effect somehow? But even if that's the case, how could such a small auction house dare to sell something so valuable? Luffy's mind raced, question after question tumbling through his head. Finally, he activated his observation haki, a subtle wave of awareness sweeping across the auction hall. As expected, he detected two powerful presences watching from above, observers stationed on the upper floor. Damn, there are two people here stronger than me. Looks like I can't just take it by force. Luffy frowned, anxiety flickering in his heart. On stage, the auctioneer dramatically raised his gavel and declared, starting bid, 500 million berries. What? Even among the elite of the Grand Line, the room erupted in shock at the astronomical starting price. Damn it, I only brought 400 million. Tell the boss to bring another 300 mil, no, 400. Hurry. The room descended into chaos. Although rumors had circulated that a logia-type fruit would be auctioned today, no one expected this fruit, one of the strongest in existence. In that moment, no one questioned whether the starting price was too high. They only cursed themselves for not bringing more money. What do? I can't let anyone else get it. Luffy's brow furrowed in worry. The bidding had already begun. 510 million, 530 million, 600 million. The price soared rapidly, hitting 800 million in mere moments. Luffy scanned the room and muttered to himself, screw it. I'll deal with the consequences later. 1 billion, he shouted. Gasp! A wave of shock swept through the hall. Everyone turned toward the back row, where Luffy sat. Even Robin, wearing a mask and standing beside a VIP, turned curiously to look at the young man who seemed about her age. 1 billion berries, going once. The auctioneer raised his gavel and struck once. 1 billion berries, going twice. 1 bill. Hold it. From the front of the hall, the big shot beside Robin stood up and interrupted. I suspect this man lacks the means to pay 1 billion berries. His voice sent another murmur rippling through the crowd. Who is that guy? Never seen him before. He's definitely not from around here. Their suspicion was understandable. The front seats were reserved for major players of the Grand Line. The back rows were mostly for lackeys or members of minor organizations. Even the auctioneer hesitated under the weight of their doubts. Initially, He just wanted to hike up the price, assuming no one would dare cause trouble on Shichibukai territory. But now, as he examined Luffy more closely, he nervously asked, Sir, could you please provide some proof of identity?" Luffy lowered his head and muttered, "What a pain." He began to walk down the aisle, step by step. Tap, tap. The hall fell silent. Luffy's footsteps echoed like thunder in the hearts of everyone present. Reaching the center of the hall, Luffy raised his head. A sudden gust of unseen wind blew through, rustling his hair. Crack. A visible crack split the ground. A kingly presence, Conqueror's Haki, burst forth once more. The floor shattered. One by one, people collapsed unconscious in their seats. Even the auctioneer slumped to the floor. Only a handful remained conscious. Luffy stepped forward again. He stopped in front of the big shot who had questioned him, standing above him on the stage, gazing down. "What kind of proof do you need?" he asked, his eyes darkening, then flashing with a cold, black light. His calm voice carried an unmistakable authority that allowed no refusal. The man trembled, drenched in sweat. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. Terror consumed him. In that moment, he wished he could simply pass out like the others. Luffy ignored him and turned his gaze back to the Maramara no Mi. Crack. His Conqueror's Haki was still flaring. Robin's mask suddenly shattered, pieces falling to the floor. Luffy looked at her curiously. She seemed familiar. Though unsure, he eased the pressure on her and said nothing more. He had more pressing matters to deal with. Relieved, Robin stumbled back into her seat, only to hear approaching footsteps. She looked up toward the staircase. From the second floor, two figures descended. One hunched, with messy hair and a thick glob of snot hanging from his nose. The other had a muscular upper body, skinny legs, bronze-toned skin, and stood nearly 3 meters tall, clad in golden armor around his waist. They were none other than the top two officers of the Don Quixote family. Trebol, wielder of the Beta Beta no Mi, and Pika, user of the Ishi Ishi no Mi. The two men eyed Luffy with deep wariness. They recognized that aura immediately. It was the same as their young masters, a Haki possessed by 1 in a million, Conqueror's Haki. Luffy stared back at the two and understood why the Maramara no Mi had ended up here. On the first half of the Grand Line, logia fruits were objects of obsession, battled over by thousands. But in the New World, where the truly strong roamed, personal power reigned supreme. Unless a devil fruit suited them perfectly, most wouldn't even bother. For someone like Doflamingo, it made perfect sense to turn the fruit into maximum profit instead. Trebol stepped forward, enduring the pressure of Luffy's Haki, and demanded, "Who are you? Why have you come to disrupt the Don Quixote family's auction?" Luffy withdrew his Haki. His pupils brightened, and after a moment's thought, he replied, "I want to make a deal with you." "A deal?" Trebol took a curious step forward. "First you crash our auction, and now you say you want to make a deal with us. Isn't that a little out of line?" If Luffy hadn't displayed that burst of Conqueror's Haki, Trebol wouldn't have wasted a single word on him. Anyone who dares interfere with the young master's business usually ends up with only one fate, death. But this time, Doflamingo's goal was different. He had planned to use the Maramara no Mi, which he had obtained by chance, to cultivate a puppet power in the first half of the Grand Line. With that, he could conduct arms deals even more discreetly. $1 billion or so berries wasn't a small sum, but to Joker, the emperor of the underworld's arms trade, it was far from troublesome. After all, money is only useful when spent. Hoarding it is just stacking up worthless paper. If this investment could secure control over the underground forces of the first half of the Grand Line, then it would all be worth it. Luffy could vaguely guess Trebol's thoughts. If they had no interest in a deal, they would have started fighting already. He was ready to grab Robin and escape if needed. But judging from Trebol's demeanor, they didn't seem ready for a fight. If anything, he sounded like he was just going through the motions. Luffy didn't have the patience to play games. He got straight to the point. "I'll work for you for 5 years. In exchange, I want the Maramara no Mi. That's my offer." "What?" Trebol was stunned by Luffy's bluntness. "I won't repeat myself," Luffy said coolly. "You can report this to your boss now." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked toward Robin. Robin was still frozen in place. Even though she'd lived among the shadows her whole life, This was her first time meeting one of the real rulers of Port Camus, much less a top officer of the Shichibukai's Don Quixote family. Luffy didn't care what she was thinking. He strolled right up to her and suddenly smiled. "Nico Robin, right?" Robin flinched. Her eyes reflected pure fear, like a fugitive caught in a spotlight. "Relax," Luffy said gently, still smiling. He leaned down beside her and whispered in her ear, just loud enough for the two of them to hear, "Admiral Aokiji used to serve under my grandfather. I know all about your past." Luffy had learned to bluff smoothly by now, dropping names like it was second nature. But Robin's mind went blank. It was as if she had suddenly plunged into an endless icy abyss. The memories she had locked away, the ones she thought she'd buried long ago, surged back. Her mother, Professor Clover, Saul. All it took was Luffy's quiet words to rip those memories open. Tears she hadn't shed in years, slipped down her face without a sound. She was so used to betrayal that she didn't even try to stop them. Luffy was stunned. He had just been trying to find a good excuse to approach her, to show her he meant no harm. But who knew she'd start crying just like that? Women really were made of water, crying without warning or reason. "Robin, Robin, Robin." Luffy called her name over a dozen times before she slowly came back to herself. When she opened her eyes, she saw him looking utterly confused. Realizing she'd lost her composure, Robin quickly wiped away the tears with her sleeve and returned to her usual cold, aloof expression. Beneath her thick lashes, her eyes were dark and distant. Her voice was low and wary. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" At that moment, Robin seemed almost resigned to her fate. She figured Luffy must be some kind of secret government agent who had discovered her while on another mission. Having felt his power firsthand, she knew she had no chance of escape. If this was the end, maybe it was better to surrender and get it over with. She'd suffered enough already over the years. Her eyes welled up again. Now Luffy really panicked. Seeing her on the verge of tears again, he quickly blurted out. "Don't get the wrong idea. I just think you're really beautiful. So, how about joining my pirate crew?" Robin blinked, her tear-damp lashes fluttering in confusion. Pirate crew. It was like she didn't even understand the words. "Sir, the young master would like to speak with you directly." Treble's voice suddenly interrupted, breaking the moment between Luffy and Robin. Luffy signaled Robin to wait and turned to Treble, who was holding out a Den Den Mushi with a mischievous face, two fiery red triangular lenses over its eyes and a pink feather boa curled around its neck. The Den Den Mushi, a snail-like creature used for communication, blinked awake. When connected, it mimicked the speaker's voice and expressions. Luffy took the Den Den Mushi with one hand and spoke calmly into the receiver. "I'm Luffy. I assume this old guy told you my offer." Foo 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 foo. A strange, twisted laugh came from the other end. "Kid, do you think causing chaos on my turf means you can just walk away? In the new world, people with Conqueror's haki are a dime a dozen. You think having it makes you special?" Doflamingo's voice grew increasingly intense. Even through the Den Den Mushi, the pressure was palpable. But Luffy interrupted without hesitation. "Enough, Daffy. Just tell me your conditions. If you weren't interested, you wouldn't be wasting your time talking to me." "Foo foo 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 foo, you're refreshingly direct," the voice laughed again. "Here's the deal, come back to Dressrosa with Treble and Pika. Work for me for 10 years. After that, you're free to go, or stay." "Doflamingo, are you serious?" Luffy's eyes narrowed dangerously. Pika subtly shifted, moving to guard the Mera Mera no Mi. Treble's sticky body twitched, ready for combat. The room went completely still. Robin didn't even dare breathe. After a long pause, Luffy spoke coldly. "How about this, I'll give you something to hold over me." "Oh." The Den Den Mushi chuckled. "Let's hear it." Doflamingo sounded amused, unconcerned. "I'm the one who killed Saint Jalmic." Silence. A heavy, absolute silence filled the room. Even on the other end of the line, Doflamingo could be heard breathing a little harder. To the people of this world, the celestial dragons were like ancient emperors. Merely thinking of defying them was unthinkable, let alone killing one. A drop of sweat rolled down the Den Den Mushi's shell. Finally, Luffy broke the silence. "What's wrong, Don Quixote Doflamingo?" He emphasized the family name. The Mara Mara no mi, in exchange for 5 years of your service in the first half of the Grand Line, Doflamingo said crisply. He didn't doubt it. Someone with a king's presence wouldn't lie about something like that. Trebol. Yes, young master. Kill everyone who witnessed this. Understood. Doflamingo hung up with a grave expression, then turned to the castle window and looked out at the sky. A moment later, he burst into laughter. Foo 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 foo, foo ha 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 ha. This sea just keeps getting more and more fun. Ha 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 ha. Chapter 49, Cotton Gloves. Breaking news. A warlord of the sea suffers humiliation like never before. 3 days ago, the Camus auction house, an industry under the Don Quixote family, one of the 7 warlords, was attacked by a mysterious organization. Camus, one of the Grand Line's most renowned commercial hubs, is now the center of a storm. According to reports, the unknown assailants showed zero mercy, slaughtering everyone in attendance and looting every item slated for auction. Upon hearing the news in the New World, the Don Quixote family's head, Don Quixote Doflamingo, flew into a rage. He immediately issued a bounty, 500 million berries for information leading to the apprehension or identification of the perpetrators. Rewards will be offered depending on the quality of intel. Contact the new head of Camus auction house, Demon Kid, Luffy. That was the entire front page of today's newspaper. Robin set the paper down, her expression complex. She glanced at Luffy, still slumped across the desk, sleeping like a harmless child. That day, he and Trebol, along with Pika, had slaughtered over 200 high-ranking underground figures. She alone had been spared. Now, the entire underworld of the Grand Line's first half was in utter chaos, pillaging, bloodshed, and warfare spread like wildfire. Ironically, the previously peaceful nations had grown even more peaceful, untouched by the growing unrest. Just one conversation between a few people had shifted the balance of the world. Robin couldn't help but think of her mother and the scholars who had perished on Ohara. They spent their lives chasing the truth of history. But who decides what the truth is in the end? Was it right or wrong? Purururu, purururu. The Den Den Mushi's ringing pulled Robin from her thoughts. She quickly picked up the snail phone and walked over to Luffy. Leaning down to the ear barely visible beneath his messy hair, she called out loudly. Boss, you've got a call. Honestly, she hadn't wanted to call him that. She still didn't understand why he trusted her enough to hand over full control of the auction house. He neither interfered nor asked questions. Now, all of Camus referred to her as the new queen of the city. But the memory of Luffy's cold eyes, and even faint excitement, during the massacre was seared into her mind. Luffy groggily opened his eyes, squinting blearily at the icy beauty before him. He sat up, wiped drool from his chin, stretched with a big yawn, then took the receiver from Robin under her resigned gaze. Trebol's raspy voice exploded from the Den Den Mushi. Kid, next time, could you answer the damn phone a little faster? Luffy yawned again, bored. Yeah, what is it this time? Trebol snapped back to business. The young master's sending some new personnel over to help you reopen the auction house. Also, lately there's. You can just tell Robin all this. Before Trebol could finish, Luffy casually passed the snail phone to Robin, then collapsed back onto the desk to sleep. Robin had no choice but to accept the call and handle matters that Luffy, as boss, clearly should have been taking care of himself. Unbelievable. Trebol slammed down his own receiver back in the new world, fuming. Just thinking about Luffy's attitude made his blood boil. How the hell does a guy like that even have conqueror's haki? On the other end, Robin also hung up with a sigh. She glanced at Luffy, still asleep, and walked out of the office in silence. Luffy, dreaming peacefully, had no idea. Or more likely, he simply didn't care. What truly mattered to him right now, was recovering the mental energy he'd burned through the night before. Flashback. Yesterday, 11:59 p.m. Luffy lay excitedly on the bed in his newly renovated boss suite, counting down the final seconds. 56, 57, 58, 59, 60. Ding. Random item refresh successful. Please check your inventory. The system chime rang in his mind as Luffy eagerly opened the in-system shop. After slaughtering a mountain of underworld bosses under Trebol and Pika's noses 2 days ago, Luffy's gold balance had finally surpassed the 500,000 mark. Unfortunately, this month's top-tier items, the Rui Jingu Bang, the 100,000-year soul ring, and the bone-chilling cold flame, were absurdly expensive. Luffy didn't even have the courage to count how many zeros were on those price tags. So when the clock struck midnight and the new monthly items refreshed, he immediately opened the random item tab. Item number 1. Roman Artillery, Pumpkin. Origin: Akame ga Kill. Description: base damage equals half the user's mental strength. The higher the threat level the user faces, the more powerful the shots become, up to 100x base damage. Price: 300,000 gold. Ah, what a gimmick, Luffy groaned. If I'm already under threat, how am I even supposed to shoot straight? He had no idea that this was a powerful weapon for those who mastered the art of gun kata. He tapped on the second item. Item number 2, Shikan Jewel. Origin: Inuyasha. Description: a powerful artifact created by the fusion of a priestess's soul and a demon's. Can merge with non-human entities to awaken extraordinary power. Effects vary depending on the host. Price: 2 million gold. Luffy winced. That price stings, but if Chopper ever used this, wouldn't he instantly become a monster? Strong, no doubt, but ridiculously expensive. Sigh. Next. Luffy tapped on the third and final item, his expectations at rock bottom. There were so few items that fit his skill set and budget, he figured he'd need to save up a lot more before getting anything good. The third item appeared. It looked like an ordinary pair of cotton gloves. Luffy groaned again. Item number 3, X Gloves. Origin: Reborn. Description: appear as simple cotton gloves, but transform into armored gauntlets when worn. Converts the wearer's fighting mental power into flame damage. Each melee strike adds fire damage equal to 1.5x mental strength. Can also launch flames as ranged attacks. Price: 500,000 gold. Ding. Purchase successfully. Item has been added to your inventory. Luffy didn't hesitate. The moment he saw the name, he knew this was the one. Even if it drained almost all his gold, it was worth it. He'd wanted a pair of combat gloves for a long time. He retrieved the X gloves and slipped them on. Instantly, the soft cotton transformed into sleek, armored gauntlets, jet black with silver fingertips, and a bold metallic X emblazoned on the back of each hand. They looked ridiculously cool. Focusing his will, Luffy summoned his fighting mental power, and, whoosh, 2 balls of flame ignited in his palms. The fire roared, illuminating his face reflected in the dancing light. Still as handsome as ever, he said with a smirk. He tested the flame's heat against his skin. Warm, but not painful. Suddenly, Luffy's expression sharpened. He activated his Conqueror's Haki, letting it wrap around him. The flames surged in response, blazing brighter and taller until the entire room glowed red with firelight, but not a single item was burned. Gradually, he retracted his haki and the fire dimmed. It seemed that if he had no killing intent, the flames would not harm anything. The fire's strength matched his mindset and intent. Incredible. This is amazing. Luffy clenched his fists in excitement. And just like that, he spent the entire night testing every feature of the gloves, burning through every ounce of mental energy, before finally passing out. Ah, that was the best sleep ever. Luffy stretched his arms wide and groaned contentedly. Robin glanced at the freshly awakened Luffy, gave him a cold look, and then buried her head back into the mountain of paperwork in front of her. If she were the type to curse out loud, she'd definitely have let out an "fuck my life" by now. But unfortunately, she didn't dare. Hey, Robin, what time is it now? Luffy asked cheerfully, utterly unaware of how carefree he sounded. It's already 10 at night, Luffy-san, Robin replied, clearly exhausted. Would you like something to eat? Food. Luffy blinked, then his stomach gave a loud growl. Chuckling awkwardly, he scratched his head. Now that you mention it, I am kinda hungry. You're the best, Robin, always thinking ahead. Robin's lips twitched. In her head, she thought, you slept all day. Of course you're hungry. She ordered the servants to prepare a feast, and even though she hadn't had a moment's rest herself, she sat down to share a late-night meal with Luffy. 1 hour later, stuffed and satisfied, Luffy patted his belly and, surprisingly, felt like sleeping again. Then, as if he suddenly remembered something, he He turned to Robin and asked, "Why did Luffy call earlier?" Robin was taken aback. She hadn't expected him to remember anything important. That was unexpected. Torrebel called, she explained. It was about the auction house. I've already handled everything. There's also a situation on Apposite Island. 2 mafia families are fighting. One has pledged loyalty to the Don Quixote family. Their condition: eliminate the rival gang. Torrebel said you should go in person. Luffy's eyes lit up. The mafia. Now that sounds fun. Let's rest well tonight and head out at dawn. We? Robin asked, puzzled. Yep. You and me. Us. But what about the auction house? She asked, still uncertain. Luffy waved it off casually. Not important. Just let someone else manage it for a while. Anyway, it's getting late. You should get some rest too. Before Robin could respond, Luffy had already disappeared out the door. That night, Robin stood by the window, gazing at the hazy moonlight outside. The past few days had been a blur. She'd kept her work flawless, but ever since Luffy destroyed the auction hall and the bloodshed that followed, she had felt like an ant, completely powerless, her fate in someone else's hands. She sighed. Closing the window, she whispered to herself, time to sleep. In the world of pirates, there were deserts, jungles, plains, and grasslands, but the eternal theme was always the unchanging sea. On the sea were countless treasures, breathtaking sights, endless feasts, and inescapable storms. Robin, hurry, take down the sails, Luffy shouted. He was drenched to the bone, rainwater running from his forehead to his chin. Robin, soaked and fighting against the wind, used her flower fruit powers to undo the ropes that held the sails. It's no use. The storm's too strong, she shouted, panic in her voice. The ship rocked wildly under the pressure of the wind. I know. Luffy gritted his teeth, gripping the helm tightly. He couldn't steer too hard, or too soft. Damn it, I knew I should have taken the small ship. He had chosen the largest vessel available for this journey, hoping to travel like the wealthy. But the bigger the ship, the harder to control, especially in the unpredictable weather of the Grand Line. Now, they were caught in a deadly storm. Suddenly, Robin froze. Her powers vanished, her body rooted to the spot, like the heavens themselves were about to split open before her eyes. There's a whirlpool ahead, Luffy. A massive one, she screamed, despair etched on her face. The whirlpool spun faster and larger with each passing second. The ship was being pulled toward it, the speed increasing rapidly. They were moments from being swallowed whole. Robin's eyes slowly dimmed. She knew all too well what fate awaited a devil fruit user who fell into the sea. So this is it, huh? Sorry, Saul, she whispered. But Luffy-san is strong. He might make it through. Just then, Saul's words echoed in her memory. No matter what happens, don't forget to smile. On the edge of death, Robin remembered that warm voice. That kind laughter. Durushishishi, she tried to mimic Saul's goofy laugh, facing the whirlpool. But no matter how hard she tried, the smile wouldn't come. Looking back on her life, it all felt like a failure, a fleeting existence like a drop in the ocean, leaving no trace behind. Robin, I need help over here. Robin, Robin. Luffy was losing control of the helm and shouted for Robin, calling her name several times. But she didn't respond. He turned around in confusion, only to see her collapsed on the deck, sitting motionless, mouth moving, as if speaking to someone, her face frozen in a strange mix of laughter and tears. But the storm was too loud. He couldn't hear a word. Hey! Luffy shouted again. Suddenly, bang! A massive wave slammed into the ship, tilting it violently. The deck tilted with it. Crates and barrels tumbled overboard. Robin, still with her eyes shut, did nothing to save herself. She had completely given up. She felt her body lift off the deck, and in that moment, memories flashed through her mind like a film reel. The birthday parties with the professors. Saul's mentorship. Her mother's smile. Tears streamed from her eyes, blending with the rain. So frustrating, I really wanted to see the true history with my own eyes, she thought bitterly, just before the end. Gotcha. Luffy caught her midair, clutching her tightly against his chest. You idiot. What the hell are you doing? He roared, furious. Luffy. Robin opened her eyes, shocked to feel warmth in the freezing rain. She looked up to see Luffy, holding her with one arm while running toward the helm. But in that split second, with no one steering, the ship was now fully caught in the vortex's pull. "Put me down. If you let me go, you can still survive." Robin struggled in his arms, desperate to save him. "Shut up, you stupid woman." Luffy's shout cut through her panic. Robin looked up, stunned. The ship spun faster and faster, nearing the center of the whirlpool. Luffy glanced up at the sky. Dark clouds roared like demons, lightning flashing, and rain pelted the sea like shrapnel. "If I can't overcome something like this, how can I ever be the world's strongest?" "Robin, remember this, facing danger with a dumb smile is the stupidest thing anyone can do." Luffy's voice dropped low. He gathered all his strength into his right hand. Conqueror's haki surged around him. His eyes burned like fire, and even his soaked hair seemed to float in defiance of gravity. Ah! A flicker of flame sparked in his palm, just for a second, then vanished. Suddenly, whoosh! A blast of flame erupted from Luffy's body, stretching 1,000 meters in every direction. Fire Dragon Iron Fist, strike! With a roar, he punched skyward, fire spiraling into the heavens like a dragon. Break through! The fiery dragon tore through the sky, slamming into the clouds above and ripping a gaping hole straight through the storm. Beneath them, the sea boiled. The whirlpool unraveled. Fire radiated outward. And in that inferno, Robin saw not destruction, but a rainbow arching across the sky in her heart, as if it stood between her and the flames. She stared at Luffy, entranced. The clouds parted. Through the cracks, the sky revealed its deep, pure blue. The rift widened like a curtain torn open. And finally, the bright, clear sky stretched wide over the sea. The storm passed. A rainbow spanned the horizon from one end of the world to the other, absorbing every gentle hue, just like Robin's heart in that moment. "Robin," Luffy staggered, panting. "From here on, it's up to you." Thud. Still clutching Robin, Luffy collapsed onto the deck, unconscious. Apposite Island, one of the 7 routes on the Grand Line. A land of ceaseless chaos. Mafia turf wars, civilian uprisings, royal army crackdowns, pirate raids. Some conflicts were meticulously planned, others broke out on a whim. Peace. A foreign concept here. 3 days after collapsing from exhaustion, Luffy finally awoke, still alive, somehow, after facing down the fury of nature itself. He and Robin had been sailing for nearly a month since then. Now, at last, they had arrived at this war-torn island. They docked at a quiet, unguarded coast, ending the long and tiresome journey at sea. "So, where's this Mafia Doflamingo mentioned?" Luffy asked as he hopped off the ship, stretched wide, and inhaled the earthy, humid air deeply. "Would you like me to contact them now, Luffy-san?" Robin replied, producing a small den mushi from her chest pocket. Nah. Let's take a walk first." Luffy thought for a moment, then made his call. Diving into work right away just felt lifeless. "As you wish." Robin smiled sweetly, brushing her hair behind her ear. Her beauty was dazzling, effortless, a goddess in the sunlight. Sadly, Luffy, walking ahead, didn't notice any of it. Ever since the storm, something had changed in Robin. She was no longer the distant, cautious woman serving out of fear. Now, Robin followed Luffy's lead without question. His words became law, his choices, her creed. Yet strangely, the partner system Luffy expected still hadn't been activated. No rush, Luffy thought. If she's already mine, her heart can't be far behind. They left the coast, pushed through a narrow forest trail, and emerged before an old, crumbling city. The stone walls stood about 3 meters high, gates wide open, with no guards in sight. As soon as they stepped inside, a musty, decaying smell hit them like a wall. The streets were desolate, most shops were closed, their signs broken and hanging by a thread, ready to fall at the slightest breeze. Compared to the bustling city of Camos, this place felt like a forgotten ruin. Thankfully, there were still a few people walking about. Otherwise, Luffy might have mistaken this for a ghost town, not that he'd mind seeing one. Stepping over cracked marble tiles, Luffy decided to find a hotel, hopefully one that wasn't crawling with bugs. Robin followed quietly behind him, step for step. Suddenly, a group of children burst from a side alley. Their clothes were torn, shoes full of holes, but they laughed and played as they ran straight toward Luffy. Leading them was a slightly taller boy with messy brown hair. The kids scattered around Luffy and Robin, avoiding them easily, except for the brown-haired boy, who was too busy talking to notice and ran straight into Luffy's chest. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The boy bowed twice, trembling with panic, and tried to walk away quickly, clearly terrified of making Luffy angry. But, snap, Luffy grabbed his arm and yanked him back. "Whoa." Lifting the kid up effortlessly, Luffy gave him a light shake. Clatter. A coin pouch fell out of the boy's shirt, the fabric torn open by the impact. Dozens of golden coins spilled across the ground, shining brightly. It was Luffy's emergency stash, his private funds, in case he and Robin got separated. The boy's eyes widened, but instead of greed or guilt, sheer terror filled his face. He thought he was stealing some commoner's pouch. He hadn't expected it to be filled with literal gold. The other kids froze. Seeing their leader caught, they stopped in their tracks, watching anxiously. The brown-haired boy turned back and shouted, "Don't worry about me. Run." The children hesitated, then slipped into the surrounding alleys. Within moments, they vanished. "Hey, got some guts," Luffy muttered, releasing the boy, who fell to the ground with a loud thump. Suddenly, hands sprouted from the stone floor, gathering the spilled coins and tying the pouch shut again. Another pair of hands emerged, holding the pouch up. "Thanks, Robin." The arms dissolved into petals, fading gently into the air. The boy stared blankly, like he'd just witnessed a ghost, or something even stranger. "Get up," Luffy said coldly. "Take us to a place to eat." The boy didn't argue. He shot up silently and began walking deeper into the city. Luffy followed, and Robin, with a soft smile, quickly caught up. She knew Luffy-san might look fierce, but he had a very gentle heart. Ofoga Inn. Luffy tilted his head as he read the inn's odd name, then followed the boy inside. Despite the rundown exterior, the interior wasn't bad at all, clean, cozy, even welcoming. They booked 2 rooms on the spot without checking them, then found an open table in the main hall and sat down. Soon, the table was filled with food. The ingredients weren't exactly top tier, the dishes looked plain and colorless, but anything beat dry rations from the ship. "What's your name?" Luffy asked after a few bites. The boy, still distracted by the delicious aroma, jumped like a student caught sleeping in class. "Ah, my name's Godia, sir." "Godia, huh, sit down, eat. What?" Godia blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Luffy didn't answer, but Robin spoke instead. Her voice was soft and smooth, like silk. "You should sit. Luffy-san's orders aren't to be taken lightly." As she said it, a hand rose from the table and handed Godia a pair of chopsticks. Thank you." Godia stammered, carefully taking the chopsticks and sitting down. He nibbled at his food in tiny bites, clearly trying not to draw attention. But despite eating so little, the dishes in front of him were disappearing fast. Luffy sighed. "Stop stuffing meat in your pockets. When we're done, I'll ask them to pack some for you." Godia froze mid-bite. His shoulders trembled slightly, then he lowered his head, and started eating with real hunger, shoveling food into his mouth. Robin smiled, watching the two of them. It was a warm, quiet lunch. Meanwhile, in a crumbling old mansion deep within a narrow alley. "Brother Who, do you think we can take back our turf this time?" asked a one-eyed man, his clothes torn and bloodstained. The courtyard was packed with over 100 people. On the couch at the center sat a weary-looking middle-aged man known as Who, surrounded by his most trusted men. No one would have guessed that this ragged man was once the mafia boss who ruled over 3 cities, just 2 months ago. "Don't worry," Who said calmly, his eyes dark and unreadable. "I sent word to him last month. He agreed to my terms. Someone will contact us soon." As he spoke, Who carefully pulled a small den mushi from his coat pocket. "Boss Who, there's a bunch of brats outside asking for you," a lookout suddenly called. Boss Who frowned. "Brats." He looked toward the gate and, sure enough, saw a group of kids crying and arguing with the guards. "Let them in," Who ordered coldly. "Yes, sir." The children were soon herded in, all talking over each other in high-pitched panic. "Sir, please help Godia. Please, sir, you've got to save him. Sir." The kids ran straight to Who, dropped to their knees, and started kowtowing on the ground. "Shut it." The mafia boss snapped impatiently. "We're a gang, not the Marine. You want someone saved. Go beg someone else. Now get out of here, unless you've got something useful to say. His long-standing authority made the kids fall silent instantly. They all exchanged helpless glances, knowing well the kind of man they were dealing with. These orphans were infamous in the city, clever, resourceful survivors, who figured they had to be up to something, but he never expected them to come pleading for someone's life. Save someone. What a joke. In a world like this, life was the cheapest thing there was. Who had no habit of playing the hero. Just as he was about to dismiss them completely, one of the older, sturdier kids stepped forward. Sir, the boy said cautiously, we have information. The man who took Godia had gold on him, a lot of gold. We saw it with our own eyes. Gold. Who raised an eyebrow? Now that was interesting. During their recent escape, things had gotten too dangerous. He'd only managed to flee with weapons, no valuables. If there was a way to snag some wealth, maybe he could treat their patron to a proper meal and curry some favor. Still, whose eyes narrowed? Anyone bold enough to set foot on Apposite Island wasn't some helpless traveler. And these were delicate times. Better not to act rashly. He sank back into his couch, fingers tapping against the armrest in thought. After a long pause, he finally asked, what did they look like? The boy quickly answered, a man and a woman. Both young, early 20s, I'd guess. They looked worn from travel, but their clothes were high quality. Definitely not poor. Even a child surviving in this chaotic world developed sharp instincts. Who fell silent again? The kids hadn't given him enough to go on. He didn't want to stir up unnecessary trouble. You lot head back. I'll think about it, he said, casually brushing them off. The children, though clearly disappointed, knew exactly what his answer meant. They left the gang's turf quietly. Outside, a blonde-haired boy turned to the older kid. What now, Garen? Don't panic, Arthur. Maybe Big Brother Godia isn't in danger, Garen said, trying to sound reassuring. But, Arthur was about to protest when a rough voice barked behind them. Hey, brats. Garen and Arthur turned. It was the one-eyed man who'd been standing beside Bossu earlier. You said something about gold. The man growled. His lone eye flared with an eerie intensity, his thick brow twitching. Why yes, sir. The kid stammered, visibly trembling under his gaze. The one-eyed man's stare grew even darker, as if already scheming something nasty. Only two of them, right? He asked. Garen nodded quickly. Wait here. Don't move, the man ordered before striding back into the mansion. When he re-entered, he put on a calm face. Boss, I'll take some of the boys into town, ask around, see if any street rats have heard anything. Always good to stay informed in times like these. All right, go, who nodded, waving over another subordinate. Follow him. Report back if anything happens. It wasn't that who didn't trust One Eye, he'd been loyal for years. But he was rash and reckless. That missing eye, lost to his own stupidity. Better safe than sorry. With whose permission, One Eye led 24 gangsters out the front gate and circled back to the roadside where the kids were waiting. Do you know where they're staying? He asked. Yes. Big Brother Godia took them to the Afoga Inn. They should still be there. Garen said quickly. Afoga Inn. Fancy choice, One Eye muttered. That inn belonged to the Haikik Principality, the most powerful organization on Apposite Island. No one dared mess with their property, not even rival gangs. After all, Haikik had direct ties to the world government. Meanwhile, inside the inn, Luffy had just finished eating and was listening to Godia explain the state of the island. He hadn't expected things to be this complicated. On the surface, it was a battle between the Principality and the rebel army. But behind the scenes, two powerful mafia groups ran illegal operations, drugs, weapons, and even slaves. Godia said the two major gangs had recently clashed in a bloody fight. One of them had been nearly wiped out, with only a few core members managing to escape. Rumor had it, they were hiding in this very city. Luffy and Robin exchanged a glance. Their mission was to make contact with the mafia. Whichever side ran this city would save them a lot of trouble. Luffy gave Robin a subtle nod. She responded with a faint smile and reached for the Den Den Mushi tucked into her chest. But before she could make the call, a dozen men stormed into the inn and surrounded them completely. Godia. Outside the circle, Garen waved frantically. Run. Get out of there. Godia looked from Garen to the gangsters and seemed to realize what was happening. But how could he run? Luffy had treated him with nothing but kindness. Gritting his teeth, Godia mustered his courage. Sirs, he said to the gangsters, there's no trouble here. This gentleman only asked me for directions. Shut up. One Eye snarled, slapping Godia across the face and sending him flying. Godia. The kids rushed in, helping their friend up. One Eye slammed a pistol down onto the table and sneered at Luffy. I heard you've got some gold on you, kid. Oh. Luffy raised the pouch and gave it a little shake. The rich clink of coins rang out like music. You mean this? Smart boy. One Eye grinned and reached for it. But before his fingers touched the bag, Luffy's hand snapped forward and caught his wrist. Huh. One Eye tugged. Nothing. It was like his arm was caught in iron. You're pulling the wrong way, Luffy smirked. With a casual flick of his arm, he sent One Eye flying into the air. The gangster let out a silent, stunned scream, falling like a stone. Bam! Luffy kicked upward mid-spin, sending One Eye crashing through the inn's front doors and into the dirt outside. Crack! From behind, a sword came slicing in. Luffy casually reached back with his left hand, catching the blade between two fingers, now clad in a jet-black armored glove. He didn't turn around. With his observation haki active, he sensed everything around him clearly. Flames erupted around his hands. Forming his fingers like guns, he raised both arms and took aim at the thugs. Bew. Bew. Bew 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 bew. In under 15 seconds, all 20-some gangsters lay slumped on the floor, each sporting a small, smoking hole. Luffy fired a few extra rounds at the ones still twitching, just to be sure. Only then did One Eye stumble back into the inn, clutching his side. Robin, standing protectively over the children, watched them stare at Luffy in wide-eyed awe. A soft smile curled on her lips. Strangely, she felt satisfied. You, One Eye's voice broke as he saw his entire squad sprawled across the floor. Realizing he'd picked a fight with the wrong guy, he turned and bolted. Luffy never let free experience slip through his fingers. He darted out of the inn and hit the street in a flash. The one-eyed gangster, second in command of one of Apicide's two major mafias, wasn't particularly strong, but damn, he could run. In just seconds, he was nearly a kilometer away. Luffy blinked, genuinely surprised. This was the fastest opponent he'd ever seen. Perfect. Time to test his new move. Activating his full observation haki, Luffy instantly locked onto every movement of the one-eyed man. He bent his knees and leapt high into the air, body stretching mid-flight. His hands darkened completely with armament haki, forming a triangle at his chest. Armament. Hardening. A beam of black light burst from the triangle. In mid-air, it morphed into a ferocious black dragon, its claws extended, maw open wide, eyes burning with fury. Black flames swirled across its serpentine body, giving off an awe-inspiring, almost divine presence. The dragon didn't just fly, it circled once through the sky, then dove straight toward the fleeing gangster. The man heard a thunderous roar. He turned, just in time to see the monstrous black dragon hurtling toward him. The blazing heat cracked his skin. Fear and despair froze his body as his mind screamed, but his legs refused to move. And then, boom, the dragon slammed into the ground where the gangster stood. In that instant, sound vanished. Light vanished. The world lost its smell, its shape, its very being, swallowed by a singularity of blackness. Dark flames cloaked the sky, blotting out the sun. Only after a long silence did the dust finally settle. Ash rained down. The street had become a scorched hellscape, the heat so intense it made the air shimmer. The one-eyed man lay blackened and broken, smoke curling from his mouth. He stumbled 2 steps forward, and collapsed, lifeless. One Eye. A shout echoed down the ruined streets. Brother who'd just arrived after hearing the news, stared in horror as the dragon disappeared, leaving only ashes where his brother had stood. My brother, my brother. Aaghh. The iron-blooded who, usually calm and ruthless, dropped to his knees. For the first time, in front of his subordinates, he cried. He clawed into the scorched earth, tears falling onto his trembling fingers and soaking into the dry soil. He and One Eye had grown up together, both orphans from the slums. There was a girl too, around their age. The 3 of them had survived side by side, scavenging trash for food, protecting each other. As she grew, the girl became more beautiful, so beautiful it hurt to look at her. Both boys had fallen for her. Both swore to work hard and give her a better life. But fate had other plans. One night, a group of drunk thugs wandered into the slums. They saw her. They wanted her. And they took her, violently. When Hu and One Eye returned from their labor that evening, they found only her body, hanging, and a tear-stained letter. I love you both. I'm sorry. From that day forward, the two were no longer boys. They were demons. They dug for any trace of the culprits, doing whatever it took. To gather intel, they joined a small-time gang. 5 years passed. Their talents propelled them to leadership. At a top-level meeting, One Eye shared their past, growing up in the slums, the girl they loved, the tragedy. Their boss laughed. Slums really do breed talent, huh? I remember years ago, back when I was just a punk myself, I met this girl in the slums, absolute beauty. We were drunk, you know how it is, ha 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 ha. Youth, didn't know any better. That very night, the gang's headquarters was attacked by rivals. Only 2 survived. Those 2 rose quickly, brutally, becoming the leaders of one of Apicide's 2 great mafias. They trusted each other with their lives. One Eye had lost his eye, saving Hu. Hu, to save One Eye's life once, gave up half their turf. Their empire nearly collapsed, forcing them to rely on Doflamingo for help. Now, under a dim gray sky that seemed to forbid happiness itself. I've lost everything, Hu whispered. Everything. His fingers clenched tighter into the dirt. His expression hardened. If nothing matters anymore, then I don't care what happens. He stared at Luffy in the distance. He knew he couldn't win. But he no longer cared. Just as Luffy touched down from the sky, Hu launched at him, a blur of rage and despair. It was the speed of heartbreak. Of no return. Boom, boom, boom. Luffy was struck head-on, sent crashing through 4 buildings in a row before finally stopping. But Hu didn't let up. He was already charging, his eyes burning, his fist now a claw, feral and full of killing intent. Tiger fist, starving tiger pounce. His claws smashed across Luffy's face, slashing even the air itself. Crack. Luffy, barely upright, was flung again, scraping down the street for 100 meters. Luffy. Robin ran forward, but halfway there, she stopped. Hu stood in place, wobbling, gasping for air. Those 2 attacks had taken everything he had. Even standing now took all his strength. Puff, puff. Luffy stood again, brushing off the dust. His gaze was terrifying. No one had ever hit him like that before. He raised his head slowly, eyes narrowing. The man in front of him had landed a clean hit, overwhelming him completely. Luffy's eyes sharpened. In an instant, he vanished. He reappeared right in front of Hu. A single punch. Nothing fancy. No technique. Just power. Crack. Hu's jaw shattered. The mafia boss flew skyward, vanishing into the gray clouds above. Luffy raised his hand toward the heavens. Killer move, blazing solar scorch. His gauntlet flared, glowing in sync with the sun above. Whoosh! A beam of flame surged from his arm, piercing the sky, and Hu's tiny figure in it. It's over, brother, and her. In the red blaze, Hu closed his eyes peacefully. His body turned to ash, scattered to the corners of the world. The sky burned red, then dimmed again. Peace returned, but the city's air was now hot and dry. The wind swept through, carrying away the last of the dust. Hu's remaining men stood frozen. They had just watched their boss die, and none of them dared move. Quick! Grab the woman and the kids. One of them snapped out of it. They drew pistols, aiming at Robin and the children. Robin calmly crossed her arms. 36. No need, Robin. Luffy had returned. His voice was calm. His gaze, sharp. With a flare of his will, he unleashed Conqueror's Haki. The air trembled violently. The mafia thugs collapsed like dominoes, one by one, unconscious before they hit the ground. Luffy looked around. The city's busiest district was now rubble. That was the cost of power. He sighed. Robin, call someone to clean this up. Right. Robin pulled a nearly suffocated Den Den Mushi from her chest and dialed. Boru Boru, Boru Boru. From a fallen thug's pocket, another Den Den Mushi began to ring. Bloop, bloop, bloop. The atmosphere turned awkward. Luffy rummaged through the unconscious mafia members and pulled out a Den Den Mushi. The moment he picked up the receiver, the snail's face morphed into an uncanny likeness of Robin. Robin instantly hung up the call. After all, seeing a snail mimic her expression like that was just too ugly to bear. So, what now? Robin asked with a faint smirk, trying to hide her amusement. Luffy rubbed his temples. Well, that was a waste. All that fighting for nothing. Actually, it wasn't a complete loss. He'd earned over 50,000 gold coins in the store system and was almost ready to level up again. Not that anyone else would understand what that meant even if he said it aloud. You know who they were. Luffy waved to Godia in the distance and called out. Godia quickly trotted over. Sir, they're the losing side of a war between two major gangs, the ones I mentioned before. At that moment, Godia's eyes sparkled like stars. To think someone this powerful had just shared a meal with him. A seed called dream had been planted in Godia's heart. All it needed now was a little watering to take root and grow. So that's who they were, Luffy thought, scratching his chin. You know where their base is? Yes, sir. They're hiding in the southeastern slums of the city, but... Godia hesitated. But what? There's only about 100 of them left. Actually, judging by today's turnout, I think they were all here. He gestured toward the scattered bodies. Luffy frowned. Only 100. That few. I'm not sure, sir. I got all this information from other gangs, Godia said apologetically. Forget it, Luffy yawned and stretched, feeling refreshed after the fight. Well, the client's dead. Let's just head back, the air here is disgusting. He flashed Robin a sheepish smile. Robin's brow twitched. This was, without a doubt, the worst employer she had ever worked with. After a moment, she said, Lord Trable mentioned the reward was an unknown devil fruit. She paused mid-sentence and looked at Luffy for confirmation. A devil fruit, huh? Sounds interesting, let's check it out. Luffy's curiosity was piqued. After all, devil fruits were one of the main themes in the One Piece world. Godia, you said you know where their base is. Luffy clapped him on the shoulder. Yes, sir. It's easy to find. Then lead the way. Yes, sir. Luffy examined the devil fruit in his hand, shaped like an apple, pitch black, and etched with bizarre swirling patterns. For some reason, it felt different. Even more so than when he'd seen the Mera Mera no Mi flame fruit. You know what kind this is, Robin? No idea. It's nothing like my Hana Hana no Mi flower fruit, Robin replied honestly. After thinking for a bit, Luffy's eyes suddenly lit up. Let's just have someone eat it and find out. He turned toward the kids with them. Any of you wanna try? Usually, devil fruits increase the user's strength and potential. He tossed the fruit lightly in his hand, scanning the group. The kids murmured among themselves, then all eyes landed on Godia. Unlike Luffy, for them, a devil fruit wasn't a drawback, it was a chance to grow stronger. Ultimately, they all chose to give the opportunity to Godia. Godia didn't hesitate. Stepping forward, he dropped to his knees before Luffy. Sir, I beg you, grant me this fruit. He bowed his head to the ground in a gesture of unwavering loyalty. Luffy casually handed him the fruit. Get up. No need for all that. Godia obeyed instantly and stood. Go ahead and eat it. Godia stared at the fruit for a long while, then closed his eyes and took a bite. His face twisted in disgust. He hadn't expected it to taste this horrible, worse than anything he'd ever pulled from a trash can. Unfamiliar with devil fruits, he forced himself to eat the whole thing. Luffy, meanwhile, watched him closely, frowning. He could sense something strange, an aura both dark and cold yet warm and burning, all at once. Try using your powers. Let's see what they do, Luffy said, intrigued. Yes, sir. Surprisingly, Godia activated the power with ease, as if he'd done it before. His body shifted, limbs stretching, size doubling, as he transformed into a large, dark-furred dog with a snow-white head. The form was eerie and unnatural. Luffy circled him, thoughtful. Most zone fruits granted standard animal forms. Only mythical zones and ancient zones had abnormal or rare traits. This, definitely wasn't normal. It wasn't an ancient zone, either. That left only one possibility. A mythical zone, Luffy thought, astonished. What a surprise. You know what you've become, Godia? He asked. Godia, still in animal form, had been staring at the sun absent-mindedly. Luffy's question snapped him back. In a gravelly voice, he replied, "Sir, my power tells me I've become a great Tengu. I can absorb the essence of the sun and moon to strengthen myself. I can store that energy, recover stamina, and heal injuries. I can also sense danger. From you, sir, I feel a power far beyond my reach. But since you bear me no malice, I don't feel the urge to flee. And one more thing, sir, please don't move." Luffy stopped in place, curious but compliant. Godia turned, white canine face locking on him. A strange energy surged from Godia and shot into the sky. Clouds rapidly gathered, darkening the sky completely. "Awoo!" Godia howled. His voice pierced the heavens. Through the clouds, two beams of light broke through, sunlight and moonlight, simultaneously visible. The twin beams converged on Godia, illuminating his form. He howled again, drawing the light to his forehead. Then he lowered his head and whispered, "Sir, please place your hand on my forehead." Luffy did as instructed. Instantly, the light flowed into him, like liquid energy. Ding! Congratulations, host. You've received a permanent buff, blessing of the Great Tengu. During this effect, all gold earnings are doubled. At that moment, Luffy's eyes lit up. No, he shined. He looked like he might explode with joy. Even though he normally kept up a calm, sage-like persona, this was too much. The happiness flooded every cell in his body. His eyes squinted shut, his mouth stretched to his ears, and his gleaming teeth burst into a contagious, unrestrained laugh. Bahahahahaha. Godia, this gift is amazing. Godia returned to his human form, breathing heavily, and dropped to one knee before Luffy. "Sir, that was the third ability of the Great Tengu, to bestow a blessing on another using sun and moon essence. It wards off misfortune and brings luck." He paused before adding, "It can only be used once in a lifetime." Luffy looked at him with admiration. "Stand up. From now on, don't call me, sir. Just call me Luffy." He paused again. "So, what do you say? Wanna be my crewmate? Let's go see the bigger world out there." Luffy was still riding the high, but the offer wasn't without thought. Mythical zones clearly boosted one's potential more than ordinary fruits. Godia, however, dropped to both knees. "Sir, please forgive me, but I must decline your generosity. My brothers are still too weak. If I leave, they won't survive in this country. But I swear, I will not forget this kindness. When they've grown strong enough to stand on their own, I will come find you and serve you with all my strength. Please, let me earn this." He lowered his head once more. Luffy waved dismissively. All right, I get it. And really, just call me Luffy. But, sir is sir. I wouldn't dare. Fine. Then be like Robin, call me Luffy-san." Godia hesitated, thought it over, and said, "Yes, Luffy-san." A seed had begun to sprout. 3 months later. On the shores of Apposite Island, where Luffy had anchored his ship. After enduring the rise and fall of the tides for 3 months, the ship remained in its place, untouched. "Luffy-san, the supplies are all loaded," Godia reported, leading a group of children to the dock. During these 3 months, Luffy and Robin had converted the former Mafia estate into their base of operations and lived alongside the kids. Luffy had also taken the time to teach Godia some basic combat techniques, training routines, and an elementary introduction to the Marine's 6 styles Rokushiki as well as armament and observation haki. Of course, Luffy was mostly winging it, he himself barely understood these concepts, let alone how to teach them. But at the very least, he wanted to give Godia a direction, so the rare power of the devil fruit wouldn't go to waste. In this short time, Luffy had also come to realize just how powerful mythical zone fruits were. Godia, who used to be just a slightly stronger than average kid, could now easily handle over 20 street thugs without breaking a sweat. Luffy looked up at the sky. Today was a rare sight, bright sunshine illuminating the usually overcast skies above Apposite Island. It was a beautiful, cloudless day. A perfect day to set sail. Luffy stood at the dock, grinning. "Let's head out." With a sweeping gesture, his red coat fluttered in the sea breeze as he strode up the gangplank onto the ship that had weathered countless storms. Robin followed quietly, a soft smile on her face, saying nothing, an ideal secretary who let her actions speak louder than her words. The ship glided out into the tranquil sea like a feathered arrow, its white sails dancing in the sunlight like fluttering butterflies. After a while, Robin came out from the cabin, holding a log pose. "If everything goes smoothly, we should reach Camo's port in about a month," she said. Camo's port. Luffy looked surprised. "What are we going back there for?" Robin blinked, caught off guard by the question. She looked at Luffy, unsure how to respond. Then Luffy pulled out a new log pose and tossed it to her. "This one recorded the magnetic field over the past 3 months. Let's follow this instead." But what about Camo's port?" Robin hesitated, clearly concerned. Luffy waved it off casually. "Relax. Everything will be fine over there, with or without us." He glanced at her with a smirk. "Besides, did you really think I was going to keep working for Doflamingo?" But Robin stood frozen, unsure what to say. She simply couldn't wrap her head around Luffy's logic. Weren't strong people supposed to care about keeping their word? Wasn't everything? Then again, he was her boss now. So she obediently placed the new log pose on the helm stand and steered the ship according to its guidance. Out on the vast ocean, Robin read her book while using her Hana no Mi, flower fruit powers to subtly steer the ship. Every so often, she cast a curious glance toward the cabin. After finalizing the course, Luffy had immediately disappeared below deck. It had been half a day already, and she hadn't heard a single sound from him. Had she not known he'd already slept over 12 hours the day before, she might have assumed he was just napping again. But down in the cabin, Luffy wasn't sleeping, he was overwhelmed. The reason? He had just unlocked a new feature in his system, the equipment system. Once activated, the equipment system displayed 2 main panels, one for Luffy himself and one for his companions. Every time Luffy bought a piece of equipment from the system store, it would create a sub-page in the host equipment panel, showing the item's details, stats, description, enhancement potential, and current upgrades. For example, his current item, X gloves, was labeled, upgradable up to 3 times. Curious, Luffy asked mentally, "System, what does enhancement actually do?" "The system's cold," robotic voice responded. Answer: host equipment can be enhanced by purchasing evolution stones in the system store. Enhancements will boost base stats or unlock unique abilities. How much are evolution stones? Evolution stone provides energy to enhance host gear. The number of stones required increases with each upgrade. Price: 500,000 gold coins each. The steep cost didn't faze Luffy. After all this time with the system, he may have been poor, but his standards were high. He also knew one basic rule: expensive usually meant powerful. Luffy scanned the item description again and asked, "System, how exactly does the cost increase?" Answer: the first evolution requires 1 stone. The second needs 2. The third requires 4. Each level costs twice as many as the last. Sigh. Luffy let out a long breath. Of course it wasn't going to be that easy. He did some quick math in his head. A pirate with a 100 million berry bounty would probably yield 10,000 to 20,000 coins. With the Great Tengu blessing, that doubled to 20,000 minus 40,000. But in the first half of the Grand Line, pirates with bounties that high were rare. Most only skyrocketed once they entered the New World. So if I want to make real money, I'll need to head into the New World, but with my current strength, I might be a big shot here, but out there, it's a death trap. Luffy's eyes gleamed with silver light. Time to put the Gatekeeper title back into play. Alright, let's hear about the companion gear too, he said. Companion equipment system functions similarly to the host's. When a new companion joins, a dedicated gear page is created. Each companion can equip 3 items: head, body, and legs. Visibility of gear is optional. Gear starts off crude in appearance but evolves as it ranks up, becoming more elegant and tailored. Initially, only 2 gear types are available for each slot. Cloth armor boosts agility and mental power. Plate armor boosts strength and endurance. Attributes are minimal at first, but gear can be enhanced using special stones purchasable in the shop. Enhancement stone increases percentage-based stats. No cap. Requires a number of stones equal to gear level. Cost: 1,000 coins each. Star upgrade stone increases star level of gear. Every star grants bonus stats. Max 5 stars per gear rank. Cost: 10,000 coins each. Rank up stone. Used after reaching 5 stars to evolve gear to the next tier. Resets star level, unlocks special effects unique to each user. Cost: 100,000 coins each. The system rattled off information like a low-budget mobile game. It was neatly organized, but still left Luffy confused. In the end, he had to ask the system to project all the text directly onto his retina. After half a day of study, Luffy reached a single conclusion. The system was powerful, but everything cost money. Truly, poverty is the mother of diligence. Alright, let's start small, Luffy muttered. First goal, upgrade the X gloves.